if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, you'd say it's a duck. So if you could change the title to whatever you want, and the issue is if they're doing everything that an elder is doing, well, that's an issue. You're
Well, welcome back to Civically Minded, where I give you practical theology for everyday life. As always, I'm your host, Corey Wing. Did you know that all of my interview segments are now being added to my audio podcast on Apple and Spotify? Simply search for Civically Minded and enjoy solid Christian content on your long commute, while you're at work or the gym, or wherever you prefer to listen to your podcasts. And be sure to tell a friend how they too can enjoy Civically Minded. And if you enjoy my content, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. As you can see, I have another in-house guest. It's wonderful. Michael Colvard, and now my good friend, teaching elder, George Sayour, and formerly of Meadowview Church in Lexington, North Carolina, and recently has taken a call as minister to state to the wonderful state of Florida. And we'll get into that a little bit later. Let George tell you a little bit more about what all of that means and entails. But what we're going to tackle tonight is a topic that has been all over the interwebs. If you spend any time on X, especially if you're in the PCA, you have seen a good and faithful brother, a man that I consider to be a friend by the name of Michael Foster. He was actually ordained in the PCA and then left the PCA to go fellowship with the CREC, has since left the CREC and is thinking about bringing his church into the PCA. But as everyone should do, they are doing their homework. They're looking into things and making sure that that's going to be a good fit for their church. And in so doing, they have uncovered some stuff that's kind of problematic. A little bit of egalitarian drift in the PCA, and it's been a little more widespread than I think even a lot of us in-house maybe even thought. So we're going to talk about that a little bit tonight. It's a little bit of a sensitive and touchy topic. I'm going to try my best to stay outside of naming names and things like that. We're going to broad brush a bit because I certainly don't want to misrepresent any fellow brothers in Christ. But that's what's coming up tonight on Civically Minded. So George, thank you for coming. We're happy to be here. We got a couple cups of coffee, and we had dinner. We had dinner and fellowship together. You're here in my home, and I'm grateful for you making the trip out here.
Thanks for having me, and it was great to just break bread with you, or have a bowl of chili with you, or 2 bowls of chili, and beautiful family. It's great to be in studio. I see how you do, though. Like, you're like the king with the giant throne, and then you put your little subjects down here. Look at me. I'm like a midget on the screen, and you're like Tower. Who are you, Trump? I mean, it's
proportion.
It's not proportion. I'm down on the floor. I try to move the chair up, and it doesn't go up high enough.
I learned a lot growing up watching Lord of the Rings, and I realized that those aren't actually little people. The guys that play hobbits are normal sized people. But if you do camera tricks, you can seem gigantic, while a man who is actually,
I think I'm like much taller than you.
You're a good,
but look at how small I look.
You're a good
this is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You put me in my place here. That's fine.
So I appreciate you.
Unbelievable.
Allowing yourself to be humiliated on screen. That's
never.
That's kind of you. So you have, and I want to be fair. You, in light of all,
I'm just here
stuff,
for the facts. I don't know what kind of controversy you're entering into, but
I don't want to enter into any. I have no desire to enter into any real controversy.
Okay.
However, when more of this stuff has come to light about some of our churches, and in fairness, mostly in metro presbyteries, in a lot of the more metropolitan presbyteries that have had deaconesses, shepherdesses, various female kind of adjunct roles. And then apparently, and again, I say apparently because, again, we're trying to gather facts. There have even been some churches that it's not adjunct. It's women that are coming to session meetings and really playing a part in some of those. So some of that seems to go, and you've been in the PCA longer than me, You certainly know our standards in the BCO probably better than me. Some of that goes, it would seem, beyond the pale of what we would say is allowable in our regular standards and practices, and certainly within the spirit, if not the exact language of the BCO. Am I correct there?
Open the can of worms all at once. Yeah, we didn't know we didn't know what we'd be talking about when we got together. So I'm not fully prepared for this, but I will say yes. Like Michael Foster is posting. That was hilarious. What
Yeah,
you
I'll do
just did.
left-handed there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean he has posted it's a scatter shot of just videos all over the PCA, and honestly most of what he's posting is 100% allowable in the PCA. I'm not saying that I agree with it or it's my preferred. I mean, you know where I stand on these things, but I've, like I said, been around long enough to see that it's allowable. And I actually posted to this effect because there's this fury online now about, like, well, let's see if the PCA will do anything about this. And or guys even saying now these churches are kind of going to get what they deserve, but nothing is going to come of this, at least in this year, because where this is going on is those presbyteries have already determined that it's allowable in their presbyteries, so that we don't have a mechanism to do anything else. I mean, because the BCO is not forbidding what, at least I've seen the videos, the BCO doesn't forbid those things. And so when people say, well, they'll raise it to the SJC, well, the SJC, what is the SJC going to do with it? First of all, you need two presbyteries to do that, or two. Yeah, I guess it's two presbyteries to have the SJC look at a presbytery that is refusing to act. I think the language is refuses to act. If they refuse to act, well, they're not refusing to act. They've acted. They've said it's okay. That's an action. The SJC has ruled that as already, that the threshold or the standard for acting is, did the presbytery look at this? Did they do something with it? And so they're allowed to determine it's okay. And then the SJC typically defers down to the lower court. So yeah, I don't think there's nothing in the BCO. Nobody showed me anything in the BCO that would forbid this. Now, I typically I prefer to view our polity as, regulative principle of worship, regulative principle of our polity. And so I don't necessarily need prohibitions to not do something, but that's seems to be at least the standard that a lot of are operating under.
That brings to light kind of a larger definitional issue within the PCA. And I guess what I mean by that is, you have historically in the PCA men that would call themselves confessional, and then another group of men that would say that they are, what's the term? The
Missional?
good faith subscriptionists.
Well, we are good faith subscriptionists.
So good faith subscriptionists, and usually the men that I hear that say that, and again, I'm maybe painting with too broad a brush. The men that I have run into that kind of use that language instead of, "Hey, I'm a confessional guy," mean that in, I'm more to the left than most of the guys that would claim I'm a confessional guy. So again, maybe we're playing language games. Maybe that's a little bit of inside baseball nuance. But in my interactions in the years now that I've been in the PCA, and I've been in the PCA going on 10 years, and I've served now as an elder for about 4 of those years. And I've been to GA now 3 years. So kind of stair step in my ever expanding role within the PCA. That seems to be the linguistics that I have come across.
Right. So everybody would say they're confessional because we have to subscribe to the, so
We can take exceptions, certainly, but
well, we could take difference. We can declare a difference, and the presbytery can grant an exception. So I had to, sorry, because Fred Greco would make, would be cringing, because we've all said that we take it, you don't take it, you declare a difference. So if this is insider baseball, essentially, as you're ordained, and you have to maintain this throughout your ministry, otherwise you have to come and make your views known. You say if you have any differences with the confession, and if you do have a difference, you have to declare it, and you have to say exactly what it is and what sections of the standards there are, the larger, shorter catechism, or the confession itself. And then the presbytery can grant what they call, you can have that as an exception. Is it only semantic, or is it more than semantic, but not striking at the vitals of religion or the system of doctrine contained within? And I'm paraphrasing all this language because, again, I didn't come with my BCO.
I have one right there, by the way.
It'll take me too long to find it.
We can take it out.
Yeah. So, but everybody, they see the men that say we're confessional, and then the retort is we're all confessional. But there is a different meaning behind that. And the way I like to say it is, everybody does subscribe to the confession, and everybody in the PCA cares about mission. You have to. It's a part of our motto. It's the Great Commission. We can, but not everybody is missional, and not everybody is confessional. And the missional guys will say that. They'll say, well, you guys aren't missional. You agree. I've had that said. Well, you believe in mission, but you're not missional. So then I can retort, well, you've subscribed to the confession, but that doesn't make you confessional. Because the confession does provide us with a philosophy of ministry. And that's been mocked online too, that it doesn't. Well, then you don't understand the confession, because to understand the system of doctrine by which the confession is built out, there's a philosophy of ministry that comes along with that. Interesting to this whole conversation, though, is women serving in the ways that Michael Foster has shared online. There's nothing you would go in our confession to address that. The directory of worship of the Westminster Standards isn't a part of our, it's not constitutional. It's,
though we're working on that, perhaps.
Well, but from the BCO, but not from the standards,
right.
So we'd have to go to the Book of Church Order, and the Book of Church Order doesn't prohibit these things either. I had one guy online say, well, women serving in communion in that one church, that there was, a lot of controversy coming out. Well, surely the SJC would deal with that, because women aren't allowed to serve communion. And I said, well, where do you see that? So in the directory of worship, the chapters where the Lord's Supper is described, doesn't say that. And that actually failed at the last General Assembly
this year. That's right.
So there was an overture to limit the serving of the elements to officers. I think it just said officers, so it would include deacons or ruling elders, and then of course teaching elders. And that failed at the last General Assembly. But that proves that. So then he actually had to, he's like, I can't believe this isn't in our Book of Church Order. So that's the point. The BCO does not forbid women from serving the Lord's Supper. I mean, it certainly forbids them from officiating it,
fencing the table,
right?
Yeah.
But serving it doesn't have any restrictions. It doesn't have restrictions on who can pray in worship, who can read scripture in worship, who can do any number of things in worship. So, I mean, one thing the SJC has upheld is a woman can't preach, and that happened in Metro New York.
Yeah, which has happened.
Yeah, it happened in Metro New York, and they tried to say, well, it wasn't a sermon, it was a Sunday school class. And where the SJC got them through review of presbytery records is, well, are you saying you didn't have the preaching of the word when you leading into the serving of the table? Because you had communion, you had the Lord's Supper. So it was, which violation do you want? You didn't have the preaching of the word and you served the sacrament, or you didn't, you had a woman preach, which you can't, And so certainly where the Book of Church Order is that specific, the SJC can step in if they're asked to. In that case, it was RPR, but nothing that Foster has posted, in my assessment, I don't believe the SJC will deal with. Now, who knows? You get different guys on the SJC, just like the Supreme Court. You may have sort of a different outcome, but it seems that they have deferred to presbyteries to make decisions where the Book of Church Order isn't clear, which means you have to change the Book of Church Order. Well, that takes 2 years. the shortest it takes is well, 2 assemblies, so more than 1 year. And we couldn't pass an overture at this last General Assembly to restrict the serving of the elements to officers. So what makes us think we're going to be able to pass an overture to restrict any of what is being shown online right now? So,
Well, which brings up kind of a different style question, which is this something that can even be fixed from a linguistic standpoint? So say all of the things that you just explained happen. Say someone wrote a really robust, really tightly worded overture, and of course we both know how that works. It gets sent up. First it goes to the session approves it, then they go to the presbytery says, hey, we like this, then it gets sent up. And usually, especially if there's more than one presbytery that offers something like that, they do a mashup of kind of ideas. So I know a couple of years ago, our church and my pastor drafted our church, kind of thrusted it forward. Our presbytery approved it, and it was one on the whole gay Christianity side B revoice stuff. And we thought it was extremely well worded. By the time we got to GA, ours had been mashed up with 2 or 3 others, and it was still in there. I mean, it was still the spirit of what we wanted, but it was not exactly what we sent up, obviously. So this could be very similar in that by the time we vote, usually in June at the General Assembly, and again, let's go. This is a dream. It goes exactly the way, say, I would want it to go. I won't even speak for you. And we tighten the language. It passes. Then it has to go back to all the presbyteries. They have to kind of approve it, and then it goes back to your point, a second General Assembly. And let's, again, for argument's sake, say it passes there a second time and is now in the BCO. The language is much tighter. It's much more robust, and it's especially to some of us, we would go, yep, this is what we wanted. This is going to really tighten things up. Can you even fix an issue like this strictly with semantic language?
I don't believe so. And that's why, like, when I was posting this pessimism and people said I was black-pilled, and I really don't even know what that is. But it's just, so all pessimists think they're realists, and think I'm a realist. Like, so 2 years ago, or 2 General Assemblies ago, we passed, ratified the overture that limited titles for office to officers, which shouldn't, that shouldn't be, you would think that shouldn't have to be in there, but we did.
Not super controversial.
Right.
Yeah.
So the titles of pastor, elder, and deacon can only be used for ordained men who are pastors, elders, or deacons. And, that was in the chapter and paragraph that talked about nobody in the church should assume to themselves titles of, I think, preeminences. Again, I'm doing this all off my head, and maybe that's chapter 7, maybe.
I
So
think you're right.
yeah. So, well, people thought, well, this is a win, and I'm like, okay, whatever. I mean, like, what is that going to stop? Well, people from calling perhaps women pastors, elders, and deacons. But like, most of what Michael Foster has shared online is there's shepherdesses and deaconesses. And in one case, I think I saw a woman, like, women's pastor. So that, and then as a result of him putting it out there, now it's women's shepherdess or something.
Yeah,
So they changed the website, they changed the language. And my question is, well, first of all, I don't want the confusion. So I do think titles and language matters, but more than that, I think what matters to me is what's being done. So I don't, if it walks like a duck and talks like a duck, you'd say it's a duck. So if you could change the title to whatever you want, and the issue is if they're doing everything that an elder is doing, well, that's an issue. And even the process is almost the same. And they say, well, it's commissioning, it's not ordaining. And it's like, you keep changing language, but it's form and function conversation that really is happening. So no, to answer your question, I don't think it really does anything to put the language in there. I think there's a large enough percentage of the PCA that doesn't agree with, like, doesn't want to restrict this.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, you might get 51% of the General Assembly to agree, but in my estimation, you'll never get two-thirds of the presbyteries to agree.
Which is the threshold.
That's the threshold. And that's why we couldn't pass, took 3 years, and we couldn't pass any overtures restricting side B gay Christianity. I think it was 3 straight years where we did that. It was 21, 22, 23, maybe. We did get some language that would allow for the pursuit of, like, not even allow for, because it already was, but like more character investigation into what somebody believes, and more language around sanctification. But just people took it as a win that Greg Johnson left, but all of his supporters are still in the denomination who were saying that he was the only thing that he was doing wrong was he was like disrupting unity, or he wasn't using helpful language in his, what was it, USA Today article, or his interviews, but like the core matter around side B gay Christianity, they were supporting his position in that, and so we couldn't pass that. It would pass the General Assembly, but then it would go down to the presbyteries, which would be like, it going back to the states in our country, and it won't pass 2/3 of the presbyteries. And I don't believe any real restrictions to whatever's going on with shepherdesses, deaconesses will pass 2/3 of the press. I just don't see it happening.
So that brings another question to mind. Is there a large enough division within the ranks of the PCA? And I'm not sure that this is entirely fair to break it across these lines, but this is again, like you said, we're filming this off the cuff. Kind of this topic came up as we were kind of after dinner, and we went, yeah, let's talk about it. So
you brought it up with a smirk on your face, like as a challenge.
It is a challenge.
Yes.
So how do we, is there enough of a division there between more rural presbyteries like what I'm currently in the Catawba Valley Presbytery, which is a fairly rural presbytery in a fairly rural, not really that rural, it's just outside of Charlotte. But comparatively speaking, to say Charlotte Metro or the one that you had come from, because you had just left, as I said earlier, Meadowview Church, and Meadowview Church changed presbyteries to come into our presbytery. So you've had experience with a more moderate and a more conservative presbytery. Do you believe that there is such difference between the institutions at those levels that we're just going to talk past each other all the time?
I'm jaded, and so maybe that's what black-pilled when people say about it. But like, yeah, and I mean, I would go further, and I don't think, the guys in the presbytery that we were in, I mean, Brian Chappell's the one that came up with the progressive category in the PCA, not as a pejorative, but as a way to, so yeah, that presbytery was more progressive. I mean, they have a number of churches that I think Foster's highlighted at least one. So yeah, they don't view those things as a problem. And, I haven't been in Catawba long enough. It seems I would have think Catawba is kind of more moderate, but you're saying it's conservative. That's fine. And yeah, people say, like, what's the hope for the PCA then? And I said, well, I'm not talking about hope or despair. I'm just talking reality. Again, I told you, like, if I'm a pessimist, I consider myself a realist. I just see,
I would agree. I think you're a realist.
But like what you see in this is only going on in churches, in presbyteries that know what's going on and is allowing it to go on. None of these have been a surprise. It was like, this isn't happening in, like, what's Greenville, South Carolina? Is that Covenant Calvary?
PD. Maybe is that PD?
No, it's not PD.
It might be Calvary.
Yeah, Calvary. Like, there's not a church there that it's like, oh, this is going on in Greenville. or maybe even Jackson, or probably not even in Birmingham. And again, I don't know the presbyteries that these churches are in well enough, but it's going on in the presbyteries that already determined it's okay. So I think, some presbyteries are going to be, that's the sad part, because you have one denomination and you have presbyteries then operating almost as their own denominations.
I think, to Foster's credit,
I'm not attacking.
no, no,
Well, I'm not
I know,
validating or
no, no,
attacking
I know
him.
that. I'm saying, I think, to Michael Foster's credit, or some of the other men, even within our own denomination, who have seen some of these things, including myself, and been somewhat disturbed by it, and went, "What do we do?" It is a surprise, because maybe we're not in those presbyteries. I know 7, 8, 9 months ago, Matthew Everhard did an episode exposing the same thing. Uh, and that's been one of the complaints from some of the men in our denomination is, well, Michael Foster is just rebel rousing. He's not even in the PCA. Well, Matthew Everhard is, and he's fairly well respected in the PCA, and
He's not a troublemaker.
and he's not, and Matthew's not a troublemaker. And again, that's pretending like Michael is, and I don't think
No,
Michael is.
I'm not inferring that.
Right,
I'm just saying,
right.
Matthew, I've already
But
said he's respected. He's not viewed as a
I
troublemaker.
mean, he's above reproach.
Yeah.
And he brought this up 7, 8 months ago. And one of the churches in my own presbytery was in the list he brought up. And it did shock us. And we did form a committee.
So you guys didn't know?
No,
because I mean, we weren't there at the time.
We did not know.
Okay.
Or at least many of us didn't know. I'm not going to say to a man we didn't.
Okay.
But enough of us did not know to where there was a committee formed and it was looked into. And yes, there was letters written and explanations given, and we still probably didn't all see eye to eye at the end of it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not the requirement, right? I mean, I don't want to be so difficult or inflexible that I have to say you have to meet my standard. No, you don't have to meet my standard. We have governance, right? I mean, the scripture is the primary source of faith and doctrine, and then we have the standards, the Westminster Standards, the BCO. So those are the standards we're supposed to meet. And I guess my issue, and we've already kind of said this, is how can different men, all within the same presbytery, all who, to your point earlier, would call themselves confessional, how do we all see this issue so radically divergently? And I said the same thing in during the Revoice years. And I said this on a live X space a few weeks ago when this really was coming to a head. I know that the Revoice side B gay Christianity guys were using, again, to use kind of fancy churchy theological terminology, what is known as standpoint epistemology, of, well, gay Christians have this unique view of God and this unique standpoint, and that they, look at scripture, and it really benefits the church to,
Right.
To be able to see their unique perspective, which of course is insane and subvertive, but that was the legitimate, or in their eyes, the legitimate excuse that they were using to say, hey, we think they have a unique take on scripture, and they deserve a seat at the table. They deserve to be heard. And so my point in this live X space the night we did it, to his credit, and I don't remember his name, and I wouldn't say it if I did, because again, I'm not trying to start a fight. I'm trying to seek clarity. But there was a gentleman in this space who, his church is doing this, and he was defending himself and saying, all the things that why he believes this is okay. To your point, he thinks he's fine. His presbytery thinks he's fine. I want to say he was in the Atlanta metro area, which again, that seems to be reoccurring. It's all the metro, presbyteries that usually have this stuff happening. And so my thing to him was, how is this different than that? How is this different than what the side B guys were telling us? Now we're just saying it with women of, well, women have a unique perspective on the Bible. They really see things in some ways more clearly than we do. And, we need their unique opinion on the session and on the, and I always go back to Corinthians, where Paul talks to the Corinthian church about lawsuits, and his scathing indictment to the Corinthian church is, are there none wise among you? You there aren't enough godly men in Corinth that you had to go outside the church to adjudicate these matters? And while it's a little bit of a different topic, obviously, I think the principle, the biblical principle in that particular passage there in Corinthians is applicable of, we can't get to the bottom of this. There aren't enough godly men to see this from both sides and then to adjudicate it clearly, to go, this is right and this is wrong. I mean, I that's the part that I think for me is so disheartening, is not that we have differences of opinion. That's always going to happen. I mean, I don't agree with the Corey Wing from 10 years ago, doctrinally, theologically. I have shifted some major theological positions of my own in the last 10 years. Um, Eschatology, certain parts of going from, I grew up dispensationalist to now being a guy seeking ordination as a teaching elder in the PCA, which is obviously covenantal. I mean, I've had some huge shifts in my own life. So I am very sympathetic to, we'll probably never see eye to eye on everything. I get that. But there's some polarization here that I don't know how you coexist.
So you said a lot there.
I always do, me.
Let me moderate it a little bit, or I wish there was a word on the right we could use for nuance. But
You could
nuance
just use
has
nuance,
been
yeah.
so overly nuanced that I hate using it. And
Articulate.
yeah. So yeah, the Lord has raised up men to lead well and to make these decisions. So yeah, I don't believe women should be a part of the deliberations in official session meetings. I just, but we'd be fools not to consider how our decisions or how we're going to communicate or whatever is going to affect women or be received by women. And the Lord has given us godly wives to
Mhm.
be sounding boards on a lot of these things. If we have women staff, we certainly should be bringing their viewpoints into the meeting. Um, yeah, and
But I think that's probably happening, in fairness. I mean,
you'd be surprised, man. I know you think that, but like, yeah, when I got to Meadowview, the senior pastor before me would have meetings with women, with emotional meetings with women, very difficult meetings without another woman present. And I think I even saw online like people mocking the thought that we would need. Bro, it's just, in this day and age we're living in, if you're meeting with women, you should have a woman present.
I agree.
And that's for your own protection as much as it is for her care. So I don't have a problem with that. I think it's wise. Also, the way I've seen it work, like Meadowview didn't have a group that we had to give a title to and say you're the shepherdess. But I had, as a senior pastor there, I had go-to women that were elders wise, but in some cases there were some other godly women that were respected, mature, and we knew they would support the session's decision and respect that decisions were the session's decision. And they just were a great ally and aid to the session in difficult meetings with women, both in the meeting and outside the meeting, to help a woman who's going through something that we may have had to deal with. It helped them understand what was happening and wasn't happening. And so I am not only sympathetic to that, I think in our day and age, we need that. And I think you'd be foolish not to have that. I'm not saying create a board and call them something and, or, commission them or any of that. But like, just in my own ministry, I'm very type A, very driven. I come across as very confident, and that has often been used against me by people in this woke, toxic empathy moment to misrepresent me in meetings, because of my presence in the pulpit or in announcements or in hard things where I do give a sense of confidence. Uh, I've been misrepresented in private meeting about private meetings. Well, you should have seen how he spoke to me. And you know what saved me? The fact that an elder's wife was there. And I said, well, go talk to so and so. She was in the meeting. And if you still feel like I spoke inappropriately, we can go talk to the elders about that. And every time I was, I don't want to use the word exonerated because I was never charged, but that puts that to bed. So my point in saying all this is I very much esteem and value not only the voices of women to help us understand how to make decisions or how something will be received, but the role they can help play specifically with shepherding, helping us shepherd women. And I know I've already seen online people are going to mock what I just said. That is a very different thing though than having the congregation nominate them,
Mhm.
because when you look at what it says about the ability for the deacons to have deacons assistants, that is not a nominated process. That is the elders appointing. So there is this desire among a lot of churches in the PCA to make it look exactly the same, and that's egalitarianism. So we nominate elders and deacons for office. We are going to nominate women to these positions, and then we will elect them. So the process looks exactly the same up to and including vows being given.
Yeah.
And with the exception now, because things are online and it's having to be without using the word officer or ordain or laying on of hands. But there were videos just 3 years ago, because I was a part of a 31-2 request to it. Well, I approached the church. I saw this happening in New York, where they called them officers, they laid hands on them, and they gave them the same vows as the elders at the same time. And it's like, okay. So all they did was change what they called it and don't lay hands, but the process was
A
exactly
rose
still the
by
same.
any other name. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
and so you're confusing the people. And to me, it's very condescending. It's very sort of condescending to women, honestly. I don't believe it's honoring to them. It's yeah.
Well, and you bring up a really good point that maybe we can explore just a little bit more of. It's confusing. And you often hear, and I thought about this a lot in the last few weeks because this has been such a topic, especially on X, but even it's bled over into some other circles as well. But I mean, it's been all over X. In a day and age like the one in which we're living, you use the word toxic empathy. I think, again, everyone right of center would agree with that type of language of we are living in an age of toxic empathy. Everyone from Joe Rigney to Allie Beth Stuckey to a number of other
Well,
folks.
Joe Rigney wrote the book, and people said that's wrong. And there can be toxic empathy. There could be toxic anything. I mean, so
I know. Again, I've had Joe on. I've had Joe on the program, and we talked about his book, and so I obviously agree. I mean that you can empathy by itself, and Joe would say this. Joe did say this is not a bad thing,
no,
but when you weaponize empathy,
yes,
it becomes a bad thing. So in a day and an age where we are, now living in the aftermath of first wave, second wave, and now third wave feminism in a toxic, empathetic environment, and I mean all of that stuff stacked up against the church and weaponized and used against the church ad nauseum. We don't do ourselves any favors by being loosey goosey with language and it shouldn't we be a little more
a people of the logos.
yeah, shouldn't we be
But
people
God is not a
that
God of confusion.
that
I mean,
yeah.
like, yeah. I mean, I think it disgusts the Lord, and I'm not talking about a particular case in general, but the mindset and the philosophy that says, well, we can do this if we just change the wording and just make it look like, if we're looking for ways to do things that blurs the lines, yeah, I think that disgusts the Lord,
Well, so
because
we need to be as circumspect as possible, I guess is how I'd say it, in our use of language, not just for women's roles. But I mean, for again, in lots of ways, for the gay Christianity stuff,
Oh yeah, I
for
was thinking that
tons of
too.
stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, again, this is not just an egalitarian issue. When language is abused, and when we are not as circumspect as we should be linguistically, it's confusing at best. And I've heard it said, or certainly inferred in some of these online back and forths. Um, Again, to I've seen both, and so have you. You know, guys that want to go way left, guys that want to go, super hardcore patriarchally right. And again, I'm not saying I'm not against a more patriarchal viewpoint. I probably am. If you use those three terms, egalitarian, complementarian, and patriarchal, I would probably lean most comfortably towards a more patriarchal style of home governance, church governance, and even civil governance. But it's where I think we sometimes as the church don't do ourselves a whole lot of favors is, and you see this, I see this language most often in the abortion argument, where you see people talk about abolitionism versus kind of incrementalism, and so when I think about this being another one of those types of topics of, I get maybe we want to abolish all fluffy language or non-careful language, but are we in a place in 2025, again, first, second, third wave feminism, toxic empathy, is that even realistic to think we could jump from where we are into that overnight, or is this more of, again, like the abortion issue, which I want gone tomorrow? If I were king for the day and I could outlaw abortion tomorrow,
Well, you're on the throne.
well, you've been here all evening with my family. Do I even seem like king here? You know,
You got an awesome home, man.
Thank you.
Beautiful kids, great wife.
Thank you. God has blessed me far beyond what I deserve.
That's for sure.
But if I were king for a day and I could abolish it, I would. But do we do ourselves as Christians any favors when we are so stubborn sometimes in our own desires to see what is good and right and true, and probably even godly, and we're unwilling to incrementally bring people there? And I guess as I've been doing more pastoral work on staff at the church now for 3 years, I'm seeing this so differently than I did even 3 years ago. Of anyone that's done pastoral work wants to see their people, or let's put it into family terms, as a husband and a father, I want to see my children grow in Christ. But if I expected them to reach the same level of maturity that I'm currently at 47 years old, at their ages of currently 9, 6, and 2, well, that's insane. I mean, that is heaping things upon them they're not able to do yet. Same with maybe even my wife. If I expect her to be at the same level of maturation that even say I am, no, the scripture's clear. I'm to wash her with the word. I'm to help. Yes, God uses us as husbands to help sanctify our wives and to bring them along. We are one of the means he uses to accomplish those holy ends. And certainly as pastors in the church, that is a role we provide as well, or elders, maybe that's a better term to use. I'm an elder.
Yes.
I,
Yes.
but I wrestle with these things.
So take it separate from this issue that we're discussing.
Exactly.
When you're whatever church you pastor, you're taking your people from A to B to C. You're not taking from A to Z all at once. So you're meeting a people where they're at, and you're moving them to the next degree. I
Mhm.
mean, so I've talked to like GRN guys, and I'm on the GRN General Council, and I've talked to like supporters of the GRN who get hardcore about churches that are doing this in ways they wouldn't, or that in ways they wouldn't, and then maybe judge the pastor of that church for that. I'm like, you don't know what that guy's dealing with. You don't know at what point. I mean, yeah, maybe if he's been there for 30 years, you can say, well, how's this going on in the church? But if he's only there a couple years, like you don't know where he entered and what he's already reformed and what's next. And you can't, how do you need to eat an elephant? You do it one bite at a time. So if that's what you're saying about the denomination, I think that's why I put some of those tweets that are deemed like pessimistic is realistically, I don't know what Michael Foster's expectation is. First of all, I don't think bringing things into the light is a bad thing. I think, but I do think realistic expectations of the Twitter sphere, whatever that this doesn't do anything now. Like nothing is about to happen because of this. I mean, certain things will happen, but what you're going to see is what I mentioned earlier about women's pastor. It's blasted out on X, and now it's changed to women's shepherdess. That's what you're going to see. So if you're upset that it even exists to begin with, are you satisfied with the name change? Because there's nothing now to deal with that. That's it. That's you say, well, the SJC. I've already said the SJC is only going to deal with things that are grossly unconstitutional in the case that the court where that has jurisdiction refuses to act. Refuses to act doesn't mean the court has done what you want them to do. It means they've looked at it, they've evaluated it based on the standards, and they've determined whether it or not it is a violation. And so, that the threshold is so low for what refuses to act is. So I think denominationally, if you don't want women reading scripture, women praying in worship, women serving the elements, women being called shepherdesses and women being called deaconesses, the world we're in right now is in certain presbyteries that won't be allowed, and in certain presbyteries that will be allowed. If you want it banned, you have to add a BCO amendment, which means you have to get 51% of an assembly to agree on the BCO amendment, that the language will be such that there's no wiggle room around it. But then it will have to pass 2/3 of the presbyteries. And what we've proven, at least with side B gay Christianity, is there's not 2/3 of the presbyteries that are going to do these things.
Which is far more heinous, let's be honest.
Yes.
Far more
and that's my
heinous.
point. Yes. Right. The side B gay Christianity thing is far more heinous, and we couldn't get 2/3 of the presbyteries to pass it because they viewed it as just semantics. So I don't believe with today's PCA you will get 2/3 of the presbyteries. And so what that means is I think you're playing the long game. And what people don't understand is a presbytery that already allows things that maybe the more right side denomination doesn't view as constitutional. It's a self-perpetuating process. It's kind of like how the Pope is picked in the Catholic Church. It's the Pope picks the cardinals, and then the cardinals pick the next Pope. And so you don't get people who don't fit in presbyteries ideologically, typically going into presbyteries because they're just not a fit in those churches. And so how it changes, I don't know. I suspect what I suspect will happen is the window of what many of these churches are going to do will move outside of what the PCA actually will allow. And in that case,
the Overton window will continue to slide leftward
in those areas.
Right.
And then in confessional. So sadly, what you're going to have is a polarizing in the PCA where conservative presbyteries get more conservative because of this stuff is going on, and they don't want to be that. And what we're calling progressive presbyteries, which again, I don't know of any church or presbytery teaching elder that's denying inerrancy of scripture. So I'm not calling them theological liberals, but it's clearly more progressive within the window of the PCA, become more progressive until perhaps it gets to the point where they move outside the boundaries of the PCA. Then there's something actionable, or they leave on their own because they recognize it, which is what you see. You see
Greg Johnson did.
Yeah, and others. I mean, there are plenty of people that weren't under threat of charges who have left because they realize they're not a fit. I don't think we're there yet. I think we're many, many years from that. I really.
Well, and to your point, you brought up, the term liberal. I know Brad Isbell has kind of beat that drum as well. because Brad's very exacting with language, and it's one of the things I appreciate about Brad. Is no, these terms mean something.
Yeah.
And while we may have issues, that's not one of them. I mean, and so I think when you look at the what you call the Twitter sphere, and I mean, not that that's a bad term for it, that's the term for it, but when you look at the Twitter sphere or the online, mob, and that, and oftentimes, sadly, is what they are. That they're kind of a lynch style mob. They want what they want. They want it right now. The PCA. I said this. I was on Keith Foskey's podcast with Matthew Everhart a few months ago, and it's one of the things that Matthew and I said to Keith as a Baptist, because he was asking us questions about the PCA. And
is that the trifecta for you? Rigney, Everhard, and Foskey?
Foskey and Everhart more so. I mean, Joe Rigney's a great guy, but I don't know Joe. I've had him on the show.
Okay.
The other two I would actually get to call friends, but not even to the level that I would call you. You're a good friend. So you've been in my home.
Thank you.
But one of the things that Matthew and I were telling Keith that day was, this is a feature of what it means to be Presbyterian. We don't do anything quickly. It's not, and we're not ashamed of that. Actually, it's kind of a badge of honor. We much like you mentioned kind of the American government, you related our system to the American government because it is very similar, actually. And just like in the American governmental system, it is intentionally meant to move slowly so that no one can wrest power and wield it and consolidate it too fast. So I mean, this really is a feature of Presbyterianism. And so we are playing the long game. I mean, that by definition, Presbyterians are always kind of playing the long game. So my encouragement, maybe as we start to wrap this up, is that if especially if you're a young guy in the PCA, or you're a young guy who's looking at the PCA and saying, are they worth becoming a part of? Are they liberal? Are they worth saving? One, I don't think we're liberal as a denomination. Even the stuff that Michael's been exposing, I would still say is under 10% of our churches. I mean, we got 2,000 plus churches. I mean, 10% would be 200 churches.
Well, he's got a spreadsheet now. I don't know. I don't know if it's, I don't know what number.
Yeah,
it is.
I have not seen, I've not looked, I've seen the spreadsheet.
You should look at it. I bet you it's half the presbyteries. I mean, I don't, I bet you there's churches in almost half the presbyteries.
But not half, but I wouldn't say 10% of our church is. There'd be 200 churches. And
I have no idea.
Maybe it is.
No, I have no idea. I don't.
Again, I'll have to look in, and maybe I'll plug that in as an extra on the end of this episode. But it is. I would say it's not, certainly not nowhere near the majority. I would say we're still a conservative, confessional, conservative, traditional Protestant denomination, the largest Reformed denomination in the world, certainly in America. And so to anyone that's watching,
we're the largest what? Say it again.
We're the largest Reformed denomination in America.
Okay, yeah.
And I think in the world. We're a great denomination. I'm not, biding my time. I'm not looking to leave. I'm not even afraid of that. I'd like to serve here the rest of my life and be buried at the PCA cemetery at my church. I mean, so there is, I so wholeheartedly believe in our denomination that I say that I serve at a PCA church with immense pride when I tell people what I do. But because we take vows that say we are going to be pursuing the purity and the peace of the church, this is a, kind of semper reformata thing. We are always reforming. We are always getting better. We are always, that's true, certainly individually. In my personal sanctification, I hope that I'm always getting closer to the likeness of Christ. So why should we expect that corporately that's any different? Whether that's for us or my friends that are in the SBC trying to clean things up over there, where again, they've had some slips, and men like William Wolfe and others are going, man, we need to tighten back up. We need to steer the ship back more conservative. This is not anything new, and this doesn't make the PCA some freakishly leftward, weird denomination. It just makes us Christians, that are constantly reforming and constantly trying to sanctify, and now in this context, do so corporately.
Yeah.
So where you are, if my viewers don't know, you have two podcasts that you run that have kind of been longstanding podcasts that are personal projects of your own. They are
Grace to Stand, which I do with Darren Stone, who's an ARP pastor. And really, I was just doing that for my church. But sometimes it gets out there.
but an excellent, truly an excellent podcast. And you and Darren's um, knowledge of one another and kind of camaraderie really shines through. And you guys are such good friends that it's a great podcast. You guys always kind of talk at a level that's, you can tell these are men that know each other, and kind of it's a really natural
I
conversation.
appreciate you saying that, because like we've been in conversations about, do we continue it? Because now my role has kind of changed, and we just always have trouble getting up with each other. And I always joked with him that my congregation, whenever they say, "Oh, I heard the podcast, Darren was so good," they're like, I always laugh. I'm like, but yeah, that was fun. It's been fun, and we're enjoying it. Yeah.
And then your second one is
Presbyterian Reformed Churchman, another one I consider all the time of just not doing anymore. And the reason was, when I started that, and I told you this a little while ago, there was only Presbycast. Now, a lot of pastors had their like Grace to Stand version, their podcast that they did for their church.
Yeah.
But as far as like trying to do things for the PCA, I am unaware of, and particularly like polity stuff, unaware of anything besides Presbycast. So I started Presbyterian Reformed Churchman, and there was nothing. And 6 months later, everything came out: Polity Matters, and the Westminster Standard, and Larger for Life, and now it just, there's tons, and there's guys doing it better. But I originally was trying to do, and most of the time, I would say 75% of the episodes are with ruling elders. And because I really thought, well, Brad's a ruling elder, and he's always got these young teaching elders on, who's highlighting the ruling elders. So I'll be a teaching elder doing ruling elder, so
well, and again, which is true. And
I've had you on.
You have had me on. I am a ruling elder. And for those,
and I was one, by the way,
in the PCA, ruling elders are a huge part of the kind of warp and woof of the PCA. I mean, I think of men like Mel Duncan. I think of guys like
John Bice is our current clerk.
Yeah, John Bice.
Yeah.
Why is his name escaping me? Who just was our moderator 2 years ago.
Not Steve Dowling.
Steve Dowling. I mean, he's
on the Christian Nationalism Study Committee.
Yeah, there are wonderful men in the PCA. I mean, and well-known, prominent guys in the PCA that are ruling elders. You know, I mean, so
no, Corey Wynn.
Yeah, I don't know that I fit in those that. Thank you. I'll just be quiet and say thank you. But it's, and I would argue that it was in large part the ruling elders getting more involved, especially at like GA level and things, that helped in the side B stuff. When side B and when gay Christianity was really ramping up. I mean, from what I've heard from everyone that was involved in that, they were like, a lot of ruling elders kind of came out of the woodwork and were like, yeah, I mean, and got very involved. And for those guys, unlike those of us that this is our job, I mean, that means they were taking time off work, and they were paying out of their own pocket to go to GA and to get a hotel. And I mean, those are churchmen. I mean, to your podcast name, those are real churchmen. This is, I don't just talk the talk. I mean, I believe in the Church of God, and so I mean, I love what you do and the focus that you have there on the ruling elder side of things, because I think a lot of times they are unsung heroes, which sounds very self-aggrandizing. Being
you say, yeah, the third person is.
I don't mean me. I mean all the other guys.
It's even so at Meadowview, we've had in 25 years 4 senior pastors, and I don't know how many assistant pastors. And there's the constant has been the ruling elders. And that's just the way it is. And so also they would have the ability to outnumber the teaching elders. If everybody would go to General Assembly and Presbytery.
Which really means they could shift the balance of power in some ways about a lot of the stuff we talked about tonight. I mean, instead of 51%, because historically the ruling elders in our denomination are more conservative. I mean, they're
In the words of O. Palmer Robertson, they're just more common sense.
what a gift he is.
Yeah.
And then you have gotten involved very recently with yet another podcast that now you're a contributing member, I guess is probably the right way of saying it. Contributing member for a relatively new podcast, but man, it's hit the ground running. You guys have taken off like a rocket, and I've seen, just hitting big subscriber numbers within the first 60 days or less, but you've got kind of three very well spoken and articulate and
articulate. I don't know if I've ever been called articulate.
Well, the other two are more articulate
I know.
than you.
Yeah, that's for sure.
But who are the other two guys?
Two guys and a bozo, John St. Martin and Josh Howard.
Yeah, Dr. Josh Howard.
And Brandon behind them, and he's really the promotional guy who's done a great job of I don't know how I ended up on this thing, and we're riding the coattails of Eschatology Matters and their subscriber base and all that. And so I get to do an episode once a month, and sometimes we apparently have like a conversation or something. But Covenant Matters is good, and really the audience of that is totally different. It's trying to reach outside Reformed confessional covenantal circles to make the case for covenant theology, which I love the idea. But I think it can be very useful for congregants, because how many PCA churches are people who love tulip and expository preaching, but are dispensational. It's like there's
my church has a ton of.
I know, so did Meadowview, and so and it almost is like for a generation or a decade or two, there was almost like an aversion to being distinctly Presbyterian and Reformed in these contexts, because you have all these non-Presbyterian. But there's been a resurgence, and the people at Meadowview have just eaten it up. Like, so they just devour covenant theology and Presbyterianism and Reformed, what it means to be Reformed and confessional. So that's been good. Covenant Matters. Yeah.
Good. And then I said at the very outset of this episode that you have recently left Meadowview and stepped down as head pastor there, which I know was very kind of a bittersweet moment for you. And taking this new role, moved your family here from North Carolina down to Florida, which is where you're from. I mean,
the free state of Florida.
You got family there, but moved your whole family, which is stressful and there's a lot to it. And you've taken this new role. It's still in the PCA. It's part of what we call the MNA, which is the Mission to North America. But the Mission to North America has a lot of entities within that umbrella, and one of those entities is called Ministry to State. And so you've joined their ranks as the minister to state to the free state of Florida. So tell us kind of, as we wrap up, kind of what that is, what that means, and what your role there is going to be.
Ministry to State is awesome. The way I got involved in that is because of Darren. Darren Stone was the guy I podcast with in my presbytery, and he was the North Carolina state capital minister through Ministry to State, through MNA, through the PCA. So alphabet soup there. And really it seeks to disciple, encourage, build relationships with, disciple, pray with, and for, and evangelize government officials, elected leaders, and government workers in government. And so when Darren stepped out of that to take this ARP church and move to the ARP, I was lamenting, and my church was lamenting, because we loved the ministry, that we wouldn't have that influence here in North Carolina. And so I started to pursue Ministry to State, and through a series of events, the Florida opening opened. And like you said, I have family there. My parents are there. They're getting older. I have some concerns about that and wanting to be available to them. And so we went to Florida, and it's awesome, man. In these crazy times in our country, and also just some wacky Christian things going on in government, supposedly Christian things, and then just such an aversion to anything Christian in government. Like, can we just agree that 1 Timothy 2 tells us to be in prayer for those in authority over us? I love what the scriptures say, and this is always my pitch. It says, so that you would lead peaceful and quiet lives, godly and dignified in every way, that the first thing is it's in your best interest. Like that's so counterintuitive to how we as Christians present like these things. It should be all this it's like, no, so that it goes well with you. And then it says, of course, that because God wants all people to be saved and come to the knowledge of the truth of Jesus Christ. And I'm paraphrasing, but it is evangelistic. But the idea is, as people come to Christ, as people are given a biblical witness, as people are showed that you actually care for them, but you're pointing them to truth, beauty, and goodness, ultimately pointing them to Christ, that they should and govern in ways that are appropriate, that are ways that are godly, in ways that are obeying the law of God, and God cares about that. He cares about the place that we live. He cares about where we can raise our families. He cares about the spread of the gospel. And of course, the gospel will and can spread and does spread in persecution, but nowhere in scripture does say pray for persecution. So we pursue the good. What's funny about this? Like, so often, again, our missional friends will usually, rather than quote 1 Timothy 2, they'll quote Jeremiah 29, seek the welfare of the city, for as it prospers, you too will prosper. So build houses and plant gardens and give your children in marriage and get married. Seek the welfare of the city. As it prospers, you'll prosper. Well, 1 Timothy 2 is telling you basically the same thing.
Yeah, they're very similar. I agree. I was thinking of Jeremiah 29 as you were quoting 1 Timothy 2, and because they are such sister passages. It's not we so often want to make it an either or, and I would say no, it's a both and. Should I seek the good of the greater Charlotte region? Well, absolutely. And part of the good of the greater Charlotte region is so that young ladies like Irina Zarutska don't get stabbed to death in the light rail. That's
Yes.
what's good for our people, and that's what's good for the peace and prosperity of this city. So if you watched, whether live or even a rerun at this point of Charlie Kirk's funeral, and you thought, or his memorial service is really what it was, and you thought hearing the Secretary of State and the Secretary of War and the Vice President and others talk about their personal faith in Christ is better than the alternative of living in Dearborn, Michigan, where they have 5 times a day minaret prayer, then you too just might be a Christian nationalist. And that's tongue-in-cheek joking a little bit, but not totally. But
I didn't say that.
No, I said that. This my channel, my show. I said it. I'm not lumping George in with that. But
I neither confirm nor deny that statement. I just
no. That was me. I take full credit for that. But what I love about what George is heading to do now is we should desire all men and women to come to Christ, and that includes government officials. We should also desire men, in my opinion, but women too, because again, I'm an incrementalist at heart, who are godly Christians living in our societies, to be the ones running for government. Again, I've had Senator Devers on this channel. You can go back and watch that episode. I would much rather have a man like Dusty Devers representing me than a godless pagan. So if you desire as a Christian to see your children, your grandchildren come up in a country that is more honoring to Christ uniformly than we currently are, then something like ministry to state is something you should absolutely get behind. Pray for my friend George Sayour. If you want to know how to support him in his work with ministry to state, how can they do that? Because this is a mission. He is a missionary now to government officials in the state of Florida. And the state of Florida, in many ways, in the last 5 or so years, has been a bulwark of conservatism, and really has led the way and shown other states in the union how they can give the most freedom to their people and reject tyranny. So God bless Florida. I've rooted Governor DeSantis on from afar, and I would love to see this state be more like Florida. I'll be honest. So how can people support what you're doing with Ministry to State?
Yes, thanks. So ministrytostate.org/Florida will be my page. And then there'll be a support link that'll take you to the M&A page. You give through M&A. M&A has a great policy, 100% of what is given goes to me. So they don't charge us for any of the overhead to do a human resource type stuff. There, I don't know if there's a fee on the, the credit card side of things if you do it that way or whatever. But yeah, it is a mission. I'm a missionary, and it's funny, be careful what you tell God you won't do. And even when I say that, of course, I would never say, God, I will not do this, but like in your heart, what you say you will or won't do. And I always thought I'll never raise my own support, and I actually, I have a donor, um, elderly gentleman that has been a mentor to me, and he says, "Why would you leave the security of being senior pastor of a church where you don't want for anything to go beg for your living?" And I was like, "Man, that's a really negative view of missions, isn't it?" Like, and I'm grateful that he does support me, but because the Lord put it on my heart, honestly, and I do care about the time and place that we live and our families live, but I care about the people. And
Right.
I'm from a corporate background. I was a mechanical engineer and manager with Procter and Gamble, and I've started businesses, I've worked in schools, I've done a lot of different things, and I know the pressures of life. And politicians and government workers are under an immense amount of pressure. Oftentimes, again, there's traveling constantly, and what that can do to pressures on your family. And there's a lot of pressure to please man, and I'm there for soul care. And so, yeah, I want them to become Christian, and I'm going to be teaching about Christ, but I'm making relationships with non-Christians intentionally. And my first pitch to non-Christians is not condemnation. It's, I got to build relationships with them, because they're used to people that want something from them or want to tell them what to do. And my in is, I'm here for you. Can I pray for you? Sharing Bible verses with them, inviting them to Bible studies. And so it is a long game in some sense. Um, but then encouraging those Christians that you did talk about, who go, who are up there, to help them live godly lives there as they're away from their families. And you can imagine there's a lot of pressure and temptation to do a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing, and then to honor their promises.
Yeah.
So
Let their yes be yes and their no be no.
yeah,
That's right. These are godly principles. George, thank you. Thank you for being here in studio.
this was
Thank
cool.
you for just explaining what is really, even for a lot of, to your point you said earlier, do people at Meadowview or people at Sheer understand what it means, all the distinctives that it means to be Presbyterian, not just theologically or doctrinally, which you and I both know, no, not always. They certainly don't understand our polity. Our polity is confusing. It's a little bit murky,
Mm,
and so thank you for kind of, peeling that back a little bit, explaining a little bit more of that for the audience, and hopefully saying that this is an issue that we're going to have to deal with. We're going to have to walk through it. We need to help maybe convince hearts and minds, and maybe where we have to tighten some polity things up too. But the Lord is the Lord of His church. It is His church. He promises to grow His church and to sanctify His church. So I am always confident, at the end of the day, knowing that Christ is the head of the church. So
amen.
thank you so very much
Thanks for having me on,
for
and
everything.
here and for dinner.
And for all of you,
Let's get some cobbler, man. You
yeah,
said
let's do it. Peach cobbler, eat your heart out. We have peach cobbler and vanilla ice cream. We've had coffee. May even have a cigar before you leave. So we're not Baptist. Remember, be brave, be bold, be civically minded. Tune in next time. Next week I'll be having on PCA teaching elder James Baird to talk about his new book. That'll be an episode you won't want to miss. Thanks so much. Bye bye.